it'd be what, about 11.
Was Grandma angry?
Just a bit. She gave me a fair old right-hander. Wallop. No, I tell a lie, it was a left-hander. She threw a fair old left hand at your Grandma.
Mummy says it's wrong to hit children.
Mummy says a lot of things. I could do with a nice cup of tea, couldn't you?
Have you ever hit me?
Can't you remember?
No.
Then I haven't. Doubt it later.
There's Mummy.
Hello, darling. You had a nice time? Good. Get to the back.
Bye, Daddy. Thank you very much.
Well, she seems to have enjoyed herself.
Yeah.
Can I give you a lift? You look tired. Tired. You look tired.
I feel it.
Work?
No, it's not just work.
What then?
Oh, the simple process of putting one foot in front of the other. Tired, jaded, fed up with the lot, that's me. Super cop. I don't know, Helen. Sometimes I think...
Think what?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
We ought to talk about the holiday.
What holiday?
Lucy's holiday. We said we'd talk about it.
Oh, yes, whenever you like.
I'm at home this evening, if you're not. Well, if you're free.
I don't know, I think so.
Well, what time can I expect you?
Helen, don't hold me down to a time. I just don't know.
No, I'm sorry. It just goes to show how wrong you can be.
About what?
Reactions. People's reactions.
What are we doing? Playing games?
Well, when I asked you to come round this evening, I thought I knew exactly what you'd say.
I see. We are playing games.
What? Superfluous?
Superfluous.
Superfluous?
It means more than enough, not needed.
I was convinced you'd say, what? No committee meeting? Just goes to show.
It doesn't go to show anything.
Except?
Except what?
No, nothing. I expect you when I see you then.
Why don't you leave it till tomorrow morning? I said, why
I
don't
heard.
Well,
I'm in court tomorrow morning.
afternoon then. It's not that urgent. You know what they say? Always put off today what you can get somebody else to do tomorrow.
Who?
Sorry?
Well, who could I get to do it tomorrow?
I was only
Damn
trying...
fatuous remarks. Look, if you've got nothing to do, why don't you go home? The only one I could get to do this is you, right? And since you know nothing about the case, I'd have to go through it with you from top to bottom, right? So it's a damn sight easier for me to get on with it myself. Right?
Yes, sir, I understand.
Superintendent Brown here. Have a car ready for me, will you? About, 5 minutes? Proud? Yes? Yes. Yes, it is Gamble speaking. Well, I was... Oh, I see. Yes, as a matter of fact, she is. Yes, sir. The HMI is on his way up to see Proud. He wants us to stand by in case we're needed.
Why should we be needed?
I don't know. Now, how the hell should I know? We stay, that's all.
Oh, well, bang goes my date with Paul Newman.
Kindergarten. Stand by your desk until the teacher comes round to see if your nails are clean. Bloody kindergarten. Sir?
Not exactly David Hicks, is it?
They keep promising us a new coat of paint, sir, but somehow they never quite get round to it.
Who's in charge of office maintenance? Richards, isn't it?
Yes, sir, Richards.
I'll send him a cheeky memo.
Oh, I shouldn't worry, sir. We're not particularly bothered about...
Of course you are.
Won't you sit down, sir?
My God, this brings back memories. Coffee still burns holes in the woodwork, I see. I remember once I was, inspector over at Woodchurch. I reached across the desk and sent the coffee flying. You know, that coffee burnt the varnish clean off, down to the bare wood. Never touched the stuff again. Brought a flask. Sit yourself down then, Arthur.
Thank you, sir.
It is Arthur, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Clocks.
Sir?
Antique clocks. You dabble in them.
Yes, sir.
Knew there was something.
Just a hobby, you know, sir.
Yeah, with me it's golf.
Oh, I've never played the game.
Don't, it gets you.
So I understand.
Wife says if ever she divorces me, she'll name a 7-iron as a correspondent. Why am I here?
Well, sir...
That's what you're thinking. What the hell's he doing here, right?
Well, sir, since you put it that way...
Well, I was in the building clearing up a bit of nonsense with traffic. Superintendent Meredith.
Oh, yes, sir.
What do you think of him?
Meredith. Very good man. Never had much dealings with him, sir.
Bit uppity, wouldn't you say?
As I say, sir, never had much dealings with him.
Yes, I'd say so. A little bit uppity. So I was in the building and I thought, when was the last time I had words with Arthur Proud and his lads?
Oh, must be a year or so, sir.
Well, there you are, you see. Here I am, responsible for every police section in this area, and half of them I very seldom see. I read all the bump, of course. That's what takes up the time. But a piece of paper doesn't tell you half as much as looking a man in the eye. Agreed? So I thought I'd just drop in, and if nothing else, let you know I'm still alive and vaguely in charge of my faculties.
Delighted to see you, sir.
You're a damn liar. Why doesn't he slide off and let me get home to the wife? That's more like it, eh, Arthur?
If there's anything you'd particularly like...
Just a little chat. See how you are, how things are going. Anything I can do for you? Anything sticking in your throat? Off the cuff, nothing formal.
Everything's going smoothly enough, sir.
No problems?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Villains keeping you busy.
Well, crime generally is 35% up on last year.
Yes, and last year, 20% up on the year before. They must have a good recruiting campaign. We should take a few notes. Who's your right-hand man?
Detective Inspector Gamble, sir.
Bright?
I'd say so, yes, sir.
How long's he been with you?
Must be 15 months now.
I've never met him.
Well, he's here if you'd like to see him.
Yes, I think I would. Then you can telephone your wife. She'll be wondering.
Yes? Yes, sir. He wants to see me.
What about me?
He didn't say. You'd better stay. Oh, you might have a look at those papers on my desk, will you? There's 5 statements. They don't quite tie in. I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe you can.
Come in. Detective Inspector Gamble, sir.
Good to meet you, Gamble.
Sir.
Oh, don't stand to attention, for God's sake. You're not on parade. Not at the moment, anyway. Sit yourself down.
Thank you, sir.
As I explained to the superintendent, nothing formal, just a chat. All get to know each other a little better.
Yes, sir.
Drink?
Thank you, sir.
Let's get the cabinet open then, shall we, Arthur?
Yes, sir, certainly.
There's, not much choice, I'm afraid, sir.
Scotch, is there?
Yes.
Scotch, then. How about you, Gamble?
The Scotch will be fine, thank you, sir.
Soda?
Fine.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry to pull you away from your work.
Oh, that's all right, sir.
What are you on?
Would you like a list, sir?
As bad as that.
Not quite, I would have said.
But still, plenty on your plate, huh?
Enough, wouldn't you say so, Gamble? Enough?
Oh, yes, sir. Enough.
Health? That's better. Well, Gamble, tell me something about yourself.
No, what would you like to know, sir?
Oh, I don't know. Let's start at the beginning. Why the police?
A straight answer, sir, or what you want me to say?
And what would that be?
Oh, I don't know. Something about the dedicated custodian of the law?
I joined the force 35 years ago to stop being out of work. Straight enough for you?
Well, I did my national service in the Air Force, and like a lot of blokes, it shook me up a bit. It made me wonder what I was coming back to. Well, just before I was due out, the police recruiting unit came round to doll out the usual lecture. You know, promotion opportunities, the usual stuff. Well, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and they made up my mind for me.
Typical enough, I suppose.
Very typical, I'd say. No hidden motives.
There might be, sir, I don't know. As I say, I can't claim any great thirst for law and justice, not in those days, anyway. And I don't honestly think I joined to wear a big hat and knock people about with a truncheon.
Some did. Still do.
Certainly. And I could be one of them. There's always grounds for suspecting a copper's motives.
As any amateur psychologist will be only too pleased to tell you.
Right.
Which annoys you.
I get irritated at times, yes, sir.
I'd say you get very irritated.
Maybe even that.
Where did you train?
Selly Oak, sir.
Now, how long were you on the beat?
Just 18 months.
Quick.
I had a bit of luck, sir. I fell on thieves. I got commended by the chief, and then a couple of months later, the super brought me out, aide to CID. A few months plain clothes on the streets, and I was appointed CID. The usual.
Still enjoy it, CID work?
I suppose so, sir, although in a way...
In a way? What?
Well, in a way, I think that's where the real sense of power begins.
Conscience talking?
Maybe.
Power corrupts.
Some.
Or gets corrupted.
Ever tempted?
Not to go bent. A few times.
But?
But I didn't.
I can believe it.
You've no reason not to, sir.
Hope I haven't suggested otherwise.
I hope so, too, sir.
Token Sergeant Hicks? No, he isn't. No, he hasn't left the building. He's in a meeting. Yes, well, if you'd like to leave your name. Oh, yes, of course, Mrs. Gamble. Well, I'll tell him you phoned as soon as he's available. Not at all. Goodbye.
I made detective sergeant. Then I suppose I settled for general CID work.
And then one day the old man calls you into his office and says, how do you fancy the fraud squad?
Not quite, sir. He called me up and told me there was a vacancy in the fraud squad and that I was filling it.
You must have impressed him. What did you do? Put in an accurate expenses claim?
I presume somebody must have gone through my personal file and found out that I'd worked in a stockbroker's office before I went into the Air Force. Well, anyway, it was common knowledge in my division that I dabbled a bit on the market, so...
What did your wife think?
My wife, sir?
About the transfer?
Oh, she was happy enough, sir, more than happy.
Better chances of promotion?
Partly that, yes, sir. My wife has a particular attitude towards the police. Now, I'd be a liar if I didn't say that it led to a certain amount of friction. Her satisfaction at my joining this department was based more than anything on the fact that she considered the work more civilized. Only just. I'd still be a copper, but nevertheless more civilized.
She ever asked you to leave the force?
Not in so many words, no, sir.
And if she did?
The question won't arise, sir. We were divorced some time ago.
Children?
Yes, a little girl.
Pity.
Yes, sir?
Always a pity when there's a child involved.
Yes, as you say, sir. Always a pity.
But if you were still married...
She'd have to lump it. I like what I do. It's as simple as that.
Ambitious, are you? Is he ambitious, Arthur?
Gamble? Reasonably so, I imagine, sir.
Imagine.
Frankly, we've never really discussed the matter.
Well, it's not necessary to discuss it, surely. Easy enough to know if a man's pushing for your chair.
I've never been aware of it, sir.
You fancy this chair, Gamble?
When I'm ready, sir.
Not ready now?
That's for the superintendent to say, sir.
Quite.
Happy enough where you are.
For the time being, yes, sir.
Reasons?
You want a straight answer?
No need to ask that, Gamble. Just tell me.
There are two reasons. I'm not very good at delegating authority, and as I said, I like what I do. I get too high too soon, and you lose out on what the job's all about. Well, it all comes down to papers on a file. Well, that's not for me, not yet, sir, anyway.
Each man to his job.
Absolutely, sir.
Entitled to your opinion, of course.
I hope so, sir.
The number of times I've heard you complain about the, what do you call it, day-to-day plod.
I complain about my car, sir, but I'd hate to be shot of it.
And I might just point out that running this department does consist of just a little more than papers in a file.
He's having a go at both of us, I fancy, Arthur.
No offense intended, sir.
None taken.
I was probably overstated.
We're all aware of that, Inspector. The inspector's inclined to be a little unorthodox in his approach to our work.
Not too unorthodox, I hope.
Well, a little.
In what way?
Well, he's rather inclined to seek things out for himself, when others might, shall we say, work a little more strictly by the book.
Well, that's not a bad thing, I would have thought.
No, indeed, sir. We all salute initiative.
Provided, of course, that initiative isn't carried too far.
Well, if that's all, sir.
Not quite, Inspector. Let's face it, we don't often get the chance to take a look at each other. Another drink, then, Arthur.
And not for me, thank you, sir.
Nonsense. Dutch courage.
I wasn't aware that I needed it, sir.
We all need it at times, surely. So, you dabble on the market?
Yes, just a little, sir.
Successfully?
So, sir.
I shall know where to come when I need advice. To our future, gentlemen.
Future, sir.
Let's see what else we can find out about you, eh, Inspector?
There's nothing much to find, sir.
We'll see. We'll see.
Why did I want to see it? Well, you're a big girl now. Go on your own. Oh, you poor old soul, you. Oh, you're making me cry. I can't bear it. But I'll have to hang up. Well, if the worst comes to the worst, you can always pick up the commissionaire. Goodbye. Silly bitch.
Hostile?
Not hostile, no.
What then?
Resentful to a degree.
Why should the other police departments be resentful?
Well, frankly, sir, I think there's a lot of jealousy involved.
Because of the sort of work you do.
That, and the publicity we sometimes get. Let's face it, a big financial swindle is always good for the front page. As I say, sir, we are aware of a certain amount of resentment within the force, but we try not to let it worry us.
I'll tell you something else that doesn't help, Arthur. You're a cocky lot of devils, one way or another. We're boring, Inspector.
Oh, no, sir. Nothing to offer.
Liar. Tell me how you go about your inquiries.
Sir?
Typical case. Take me through a typical fraud case.
Oh, difficult.
Huh?
But they're all so varied, it's difficult to pick one.
Specific case, then.
Gamble?
Well, let me see now. There's the Aberraren job, sir.
Yes. Why not? A very interesting corporation swindle.
Oh, too complicated, these boardroom maneuvers. Something simple, straightforward. Something the man in the street could understand. Tell me about Faraday.
Faraday, sir?
Yes, why not?
No reason at all.
Faraday it is, then. Who handled the case?
I did, sir.
Over to you, then, Inspector. Well?
I'm not sure that this is the kind of case...
I want to hear about the Faraday case, Inspector. How it came to you, how you handled it, how it was resolved. You were in charge of investigations. You will tell me.
I'd just like to glance at my papers.
Where are they?
In my office.
Then go and get them.
Yes.
Inspector, you didn't work on the case alone.
No, sir. Woman Detective Sergeant Hicks.
Ah, yes, Miss Hicks. Is she in the building?
Yes, sir, I asked her to stay behind in case
In case I should want to see her. Yes, I think I might. Ask her to come in, Inspector.
Yes.
Say it, Arthur.
With respect, sir, I would have been happier to have been informed of the reason for your visit.
Oh, that's civil service talk, Arthur.
Well, there are times when I feel more like a civil
You're a
servant.
police officer. So am I when you strip off all the fancy titles. I was a good detective, Arthur. Darn good. And a good detective never lets the hare see the dog until he's ready. Does he?
What's it all about?
Just come and speak when you're spoken.
Yes, sir.
Detective Sergeant Hicks.
We've met. How are you, Miss Hicks?
Well, thank you, sir.
Where was it?
At the police orphanage do at Radbury, sir, last year.
Ah, yes, you were with young, what's his name? Marshall. Detective Sergeant Marshall.
Detective Inspector now, sir.
Oh. Sit yourself down.
Thank you, sir.
Not easy for a woman in the force, especially a pretty one.
Sir?
Boyfriends.
Oh, yes, sir.
Amazing how guilty people become once you tell them that you're in the force.
I try to avoid mentioning it.
Yeah. Most of your friends are in the force, I suppose?
Most of them, sir, not all.
Bad thing. Still, it's always been the same. I can't see it changing. When you're ready, then, Inspector.
From the top, sir?
From the top.
Well, we received the first complaint in July, a Mr. and Mrs. Cornelius. We began investigations immediately, and within a month we had 9 complainants, all with pretty much the same story. A Mr. and Mrs. Osgood, and Mr. and Mrs.
Just tell me the sort of people they were.
Little people, sir. Most of them living in too few rooms with too many kids. Some of them people who came into this country to look for a square deal, only to get rooked by us and their own kind. Well, none of them very bright, but all of them with one thing in mind, to find a decent place to live and to save every penny to get it. Some of them had saved all their working lives. Well, thanks to our friend Faraday, most of them are back where they started. Well, our first step was to build up a picture of how he did it, the modus operandi. Sergeant?
The first thing he did was to take a short lease on a house in the area. It had to be a house to suit his purpose, of course. A family house, not too large, not too small, in a fairly nondescript area. And most of all, something that looked right for the price. The next thing was to get himself an office, in this case just a one-room lockup, again on a short lease. Put a notice on the door, and there he is, an estate agent.
What about the Estate Agents Association?
Well, any joker can set himself up as an agent. There's nothing they can do about it.
Go on.
Well, so he has an office, and he has a property. Now, all he wants now is a month, or in this case, 9 months. He's not greedy, you understand. He's clever enough to settle for a nice, manageable number. So he puts an advertisement in the local paper. An advertisement, incidentally, still not paid for. 6 houses, all in the low to medium price range. It's a block ad, nothing too grand considering the kind of fish he wants to hook. 6 houses. Now, 5 are a figment of his imagination. And the 6th, the one he himself rents on a short lease. And then at the bottom of the ad, the big come-up. The 3 important words. Mortgages easily arranged.
All he has to do now is wait for the phone to ring.
But he's clever, you see. He's a good con man. He knows how to sift his mugs. He settles for the 9.
They don't all want the same house, of course, but they all get the same story. 5 of the houses advertised are already under offer. The only thing he has available on his list at the moment is you-know-what. All of them say the same thing. How helpful he was, understanding of their limited means. He genuinely seemed to want to help them, particularly people of his own kind.
How many of the 9 were immigrant families?
6, sir.
The other 3 being white.
Yes.
Well, how did they feel about dealing with the West Indians?
Well, naturally, they were dubious at first.
Why, naturally?
For the same reason, I should think, sir, that prompted you to ask the question. Well, when they first met him and saw that he was coloured, they were dubious, and in one case, downright suspicious. But as the sergeant says, he was so understanding, and so genuinely eager and apparently able to help them get what they wanted, that they closed their eyes.
He told them that he had a white partner who was away on business.
Part of the statement of Mr. Reginald William Bullman. He also pointed out that although coloured himself, he was very worried about the mass immigration into the country, and into this area in particular. He sympathized with the problem, a bad thing for all of us, he said. His personal contribution to the problem was to limit the number of immigrants on his books to 1 in 20. He said it hurt him to do it, but he believed there was no alternative. Part of the statement of Mrs. Florence Cornelius. At one point there were tears in his eyes. I felt quite sorry for him. Well, once he'd got them into the net, it wasn't difficult to channel them into the right direction. The property he'd rented.
In most cases, he made an appointment to meet them on the premises. In 2 cases, he took them by car.
Why only 2?
He drove a Bentley.
The two immigrants he took were the most impressionable. The others, particularly the whites, might have resented.
I take your point.
An interesting sidelight to his character here, sir. The car was his pride and joy. He couldn't resist showing it off, particularly to people from his own country.
Rather sad in a way.
Yes, sir. Heartbreaking.
The house was empty apart from a few odds and ends that came with the lease. Curtains, carpets in the hallway. These fixtures need not necessarily be bought, but the owners were, he said, asking a very reasonable figure. They'd moved out a week before, which was why he was able to offer them vacant possession. Another good selling point.
The immigrants were told that there were already 5 coloured families in the street. Now the whites were told none. From then on he had to work quickly. In each case he persuaded them to make an offer, suggesting what he thought would be acceptable. And in each case the offer was duly accepted, apart from some minor wrangling, of course, to add texture. Then 2 of them changed their minds, which left him with 7. Now, each of these 7 parted with around £300 deposit, including the initial payment on the mortgage he'd arranged.
And that was the last they saw of it.
Well, more to the point, sir, the last they saw of their money. £2,100, worked for and gone. Well, by the time we'd been called in, he'd been gone a month. That's the usual story. People really only want their money back. We're called in as a last resort. Anyway, it was quite obvious that he was working under a false name, so that all we could do was to build up a picture of something, anything, to get started on.
A lot of the information was useless because he'd spun whatever story suited him. Where he'd come from, how long he'd been here, why he'd come here, whether he was a family man.
We gave his physical description and the modus operandi to Method Index. Nothing now.
But still, too clever to be a beginner.
Yes, that's how we saw it. If we could put more flesh on the bones, they might have him under another heading.
He was always immaculately dressed, always in a 3-piece suit and always in black shoes. He worried about his weight and confided that he had an ulcer and that he'd lost 2 stones since coming to this country. His fingernails were always well manicured, and one of the ladies said, "I told my husband he was all right as soon as I saw his hands. You can tell a lot about a man by his hands." He was seen to take pills, he said they were for his ulcer, and was once seen, or rather caught, wearing glasses. It appeared to embarrass him.
Where or how he lived was a complete mystery. No friends, no regular haunts, nothing.
What about the car? He'd need petrol.
We checked 54 local garages before we struck lucky. A man answering his description had taken his Bentley in for a small ignition fault. They made out a worksheet and noted the registration number. We circularized all licensing authorities. It was a long shot that in the end proved nothing. Now, our best bet, our only hope for a quick lead, was still Method Index. So we sent them a more detailed description and asked them to check under each crime heading.
I should imagine that pleased them.
Oh, they huffed and they puffed, but they found him under his real name, Emmanuel Faraday, GBH 62, living on Immoral Earnings 65. They kept tabs on him till 68 when he left London, nothing known since.
How long was this after you'd received the first complaint?
5 weeks.
So, in 5 weeks, you knew how, who, but not where.
With due respect, sir, there are 8 people in this department working 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and sometimes more.
I'm well aware of the problems.
At the present moment, I'm dealing with over a dozen cases, some of them going back not weeks, but years. I mean, we can only do so much. They still keep coming.
You knew how, who, but not where.
We had, of course, circularized him in the Police Gazette, sir. Frankly, well, it could have been just a question of waiting for something to turn up. Let's face it, he could have been anywhere.
But?
The inspector had one of his bright ideas.
I checked with records and found that when he first came into this country, he worked in an optical instrument factory just outside London. Well, I went to the factory and talked to the personnel officer, who vaguely remembered him, mainly because of an arrangement they'd made to send a percentage of his wages home to his mother in Barbados each month. Well, luckily, he still had a note of her address, so I contacted Interpol and they traced her. He was still sending her money and notifying her of his changes of address. The last letter was 2 weeks ago. He gave an address in Droitwich and said he'd be coming home soon.
I kept watch on the address and verified that he was staying there. I also checked the local travel agents and found that a man answering his description had booked a one-way air ticket to Barbados.
So I applied for a warrant and executed it the next day. And when we went before the magistrate, I opposed bail and asked for a remand in custody pending further inquiry.
All apparently straightforward enough. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir. Straightforward enough.
Apparently. Straightforward enough.
Meaning, sir?
Today I had lunch at my club. One of its members is Mr. J.W. Davis, the magistrate who heard the Faraday case and refused bail at your request. He approached me strictly on the old boy network to express some concern in the affair. He asked me to look into it, again, very much off the record, which is why I'm here.
I'm perfectly satisfied with the way the case has been handled, sir.
Unfortunately, Mr. Davis isn't. And Mr. Davis is, as you well know, the sort of man who likes to chew a bone until he finds blood.
Has Mr. Davis any grounds for his complaint?
Not complaint, concern.
Well, concern then.
Not positive grounds, no.
Then why the hell have I...
Remember who you're talking to, will you?
Then might I ask, sir, if you knew the details of this case, why I've been made to go through
I
this?
knew some of the details, Inspector, not all of them. What I need to hear from you.
I would still like to know, sir, what grounds Mr. Davis had for approaching you, sir.
Sit down, then, Inspector, and I'll tell you. Someone has made an unofficial complaint. At the moment, it's little more than the vague rumblings of a discontent. But knowing the man involved, that rumbling might well erupt into a roar unless I can satisfy him. And to do that, I must satisfy myself. Now, before I leave this office, I shall have all the answers I need. And I shall act accordingly.
Yes, sir.
There are certain aspects of this case that could well be, shall we say, misunderstood.
Not in my book.
Don't be so damn smug. Yesterday afternoon, the man you arrested hanged himself in a police cell. That means an inquiry. And one of the heads that could be on the block is yours. I repeat, don't be so damn smug. You didn't know, Sergeant.
No, sir, I've been away most
You didn't think fit to enlighten the Sergeant.
I didn't learn myself until this morning. By the time the sergeant had come in, it had
Slipped your mind?
It had been pushed to the back of my mind by a dozen other things. I can't stop working because a man hangs himself.
I take it you've already discussed the matter.
Yes, sir.
And?
Well, sir, I accept that it's a very unfortunate business.
Unfortunate? For whom? For him? For his family? Or for you?
Yes. Yes, he is. Just a moment. It's for you, sir.
Yes. Well, you'll have to send my apologies. I shall be delayed. Half an hour. An hour. I don't know. Yes, it is important. Very important. Nine complainants.
Yes, sir.
6 colored families, 3 white.
Yes, sir.
Your statements prepared by both you and the sergeant.
Yes, sir.
The 6 colored complainants were interviewed by the sergeant, the other 3 by yourself. Any particular reason for that?
A convenience, sir.
Huh?
One of the white families had left the area. It took me most of the day to get onto them. The coloured families lived pretty much in the same place. The sergeant got 4 of their statements in the morning.
You chose to do legwork which kept you away most of the day rather than delegate it to the sergeant?
I considered the evidence of the Bullman family to be very important, sir.
Too important for the sergeant to handle?
I was taking the man's character into account. It was quite obvious I'd get more out of him than the sergeant. He didn't like women, it's as simple as that.
And his evidence was very important.
Yes.
More important than the combined evidence of the other 6.
Bullman was the only one who'd gone as far as getting a surveyor's report. That meant another body involved, possibly another lead. As it turned out, the survey was arranged by Faraday and obviously never carried out. The report given to Bullman was a load of rubbish, presumably made out by Faraday himself.
Then I'm correct in saying that throughout the course of your inquiries, you made no personal contact whatsoever with the 6 colored families involved.
As officer in charge of inquiries, I delegate the workload how and where I think fit. I've handled many cases where I've had no direct contact with the witnesses, coloured or otherwise.
Thank you, Inspector. As soon as you were given an address by the man's mother, you dispatched the sergeant to keep surveillance.
Yes, sir.
You saw him enter the house?
Yes, sir.
At what time?
8:30 p.m.
After dark.
Yes, sir.
Well, how did you identify him?
By photograph from CRO.
You saw him just the once?
Yes, sir.
Whereupon you advised the inspector?
Yes.
Where was the inspector?
I was here, sir, in my office.
So you drove back.
No, sir, I telephoned.
Did you go to the address attempt to verify the sergeant's identification?
No, sir, I did not.
Why not?
There wasn't time.
I'd already advised the inspector that Faraday had booked a plane ticket, sir.
For that day?
No, sir, for the following Tuesday.
4 days. I see. So you telephoned the inspector, told him that Faraday, or the man you believed to be Faraday, was at the address, whereupon he advised you to maintain surveillance while he applied for a warrant of arrest.
Yes, sir.
You weren't surprised,
At what, sir?
but a warrant being taken out to arrest a man identified at that moment solely by yourself.
I appreciated the urgency, sir.
And you, Superintendent?
I wasn't here at the time, sir. I was at the assizes.
But if you had been,
I've no doubt that the inspector would have discussed the situation with me, and bearing in mind the urgency involved, I've no doubt I would have backed up his action.
albeit somewhat unorthodox.
I don't see it that way, sir.
Hasty, then. A little hasty, Superintendent.
Possibly, yes, sir.
Thank you. You then applied for a warrant.
Yes, sir.
Not easy on a Saturday evening.
No, sir, I had to sort out the clerk of the court and go with him to the magistrate's home.
What if he hadn't been there?
But he was there, sir.
And he had no hesitation in granting you the warrant.
I wouldn't say that, no, sir.
Huh?
There was no New Testament in the house. The clerk had to fetch his before the information could be sworn.
And so, armed with your warrant, you made your arrest.
Yes, sir.
You said earlier that you arrested him the next day.
Yes, sir.
In fact, it was the middle of the night.
Technically, it was the next day.
You didn't consider waiting until the following morning?
No, sir, I didn't.
Were you present when the inspector made his arrest?
Yes, sir.
How did Faraday behave?
Well, frankly, sir, he went berserk.
He resisted.
Putting it mildly, sir, yes.
Tell me what happened.
Well, as soon as he saw us, he just went berserk, screaming and shouting, throwing punches.
At you?
No, sir, I got out of the way. The inspector collected most of the bruises.
Of course, you explained to him why he was being arrested.
I did, sir, but it was impossible to caution him. I mean, the man was hysterical.
And had to be restrained?
Yes.
Forcibly restrained.
He was kicking and punching like a lunatic.
Unusually violent.
Violent, yes. Whether it was unusual, I don't know.
But could it have been because of the nature of the arrest?
Sir?
Well, it was the middle of the night. A man suddenly woken, dragged out of bed. Surely this must have occurred to you.
Yes, sir, it did.
But you said nothing.
It wasn't my place, sir.
You were happy to abide by the inspector's decisions, whether you agreed with him or not.
I believed then, as I believe now, that the inspector knew exactly what he was doing.
By this time, it was what, 2 in the morning?
Nearer 3, sir.
So you brought him here and put him in a cell to cool off.
No, sir.
What then?
I took him to the local CID office and questioned him.
But he was hysterical.
He'd calmed down by then.
But you felt fully justified in what you were doing.
I had no doubt whatsoever. I had him, and there was a possibility of other offenses. I like to eat my meals when they're hot.
I'm sure the civil rights movement would love to have that in print.
I'm a policeman, not a social worker. I was dealing with a criminal.
You were dealing with an alleged offender. How long was he questioned?
Until 8 o'clock that morning.
5 hours. Were you present?
For some of the time, sir, yes.
Not all the time?
Well, the inspector said
The
that...
sergeant had been watching that house for most of the previous day. She was tired. She needed some sleep.
You didn't. What was the result of your interrogation?
At first, total denial. And then an attempt at bribery. And then some story about how he was only a go-between. He said he was frightened that they might kill him. Obviously a pack of lies.
Ah, but he stuck to his story.
I couldn't persuade him to alter it, no, sir.
Did he ask for legal representation?
A solicitor was called, but didn't arrive until 10 o'clock the following morning.
And you had no doubts whatsoever about his guilt?
None whatsoever.
When he appeared in court before Mr. Davis the next day, you asked for a remand in custody on evidence of arrest only.
Yes, sir.
Why?
To make further inquiries.
But you had the man, you had 9 witnesses.
I had 3 witnesses, sir. Of the other 6, 2 had moved and weren't available to appear. The other 4 just didn't turn up.
You didn't think 3 witnesses was sufficient?
I felt they were too nervous. They suddenly felt unsure of themselves. Well, it was the usual story. A good lawyer would have torn them to pieces.
So you opposed bail?
If he'd have walked out of that court, we would never have seen him again.
Well, you could, of course, have asked the magistrate to hear the case then and there.
Not on the diminished evidence I had to offer.
But sure it wasn't because you thought he deserved to go before a higher court with the possibility of a stiffer sentence?
It had occurred to me, yes.
Occurred to you? You sure it wasn't paramount in your mind?
All right then, sir. I'll admit it, yes. I would have been very happy for them to have put him away for as long as they thought fit. I mean, for God's sake, what kind of a man was he? He wasn't just some tuppenny-halfpenny amateur. I mean, look at his record. Beating up an old man, living off a tom, cheating decent, honest people out of their life savings. What sort of a man was he?
I sincerely hope you don't allow yourself such emotional involvement in all your work, Inspector.
You act like a machine and you're a fascist. You act like a human being and you're falling down on the job. It isn't always easy to stay on the outside. Even the most cynical copper gets sick to the stomach at some of the things he has to deal with.
He can also bend the law to get what he wants.
Is that what I did?
I didn't say that.
It's what you're suggesting.
No.
Then it's what your magistrate friend had in mind.
I'll say it again, Gamble. Watch your tongue. Mr. Davis, my magistrate friend, as you put it, expressed concern for the following reasons. 1. In order to obtain a warrant, you swore before God that you could produce 9 witnesses, when in fact you knew that only 3 were available.
That was before I...
Wait. In other words, this could mean that you went to court too quickly and with too little evidence, which is why you asked for a remand. 2. A man was forcibly arrested solely on the identification of your sergeant, an identification made after dark, using a 5-year-old photograph. 3. When he appeared in court, his right eye was virtually closed. He said he was worked over in the police cell when he refused to answer your question.
It happened when he was arrested. I've already said the man was hysterical. The blow was not deliberate. And as soon as we got to the station, a doctor was called.
That isn't what he said in court.
Now, the man's a compulsive liar.
He's also dead. It's our word against that of a dead man. A man who died in a police cell.
If I may ask a question, sir. Well, Mr. Davis is well known in the area for his committee work, and he isn't exactly backward in raising his, well, rather fashionable liberal flag.
Make your point, Sergeant.
My point is, sir, that Mr. Davis is well known for his work on racial integration.
What are you suggesting, Sergeant?
The sergeant is suggesting that if Faraday was white instead of black, then this whole shoot wouldn't have been worth a pint of cold tea. I mean, what it all boils down to is that I'm being put through the hoop just to show how damn righteous they all are.
It does appear so, sir.
It's an accusation of prejudice. It doesn't mean a light.
Well, it might appear that the inspector acted hastily, but not for the reasons suggested.
I repeat, the man is dead.
With respect, sir, no one in the world could have known that he would hang himself.
Not quite true, Superintendent. You said that one of the witnesses saw him taking pills,
Yes, sir.
which he said were for an ulcer.
Yes, sir.
Did you verify this?
Well, I hardly thought it necessary.
When you contacted Method Index, you spoke to Detective Sergeant Holmes.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what he said towards the end of his telephone conversation?
No, sir.
He told you Faraday might try to kill himself.
No, sir.
He didn't say something to you like, "Don't be surprised if he jumps out of a window. He's tried it before." Did he say that, or didn't he?
Yes, but...
You're warned that a man might try to kill himself, and he's tried it before, and you ignore it?
Well, it was the way he said it. I mean, I took it as a joke.
A joke?
Well, there are ways and ways of
If you
saying...
had checked, you would have found that the man has a history of mental instability. That he's already tried to kill himself on 2 occasions, that the pills he took were tranquilizers. Did he behave like a sane man on the night you arrested him? Well?
He was...
Behaving like a madman. Your own words. You were told he took pills. You were told he tried to kill himself before. You saw the way he behaved, under stress, and still he was put in that cell.
When a man is taken to a cell, responsibility lies with the duty inspector.
The inspector's in trouble, believe me, Superintendent. The man should have been properly searched. He wasn't.
No, I don't see what it's got to
Well,
do
had he
with
known the man's history, he might have been more cautious. Can you see that? Now, your inquiries began in July the 21st, to be precise.
Yes, sir.
Where were you on the afternoon of July the 27th?
But I can't say.
I can. You had an appointment with the police doctor, Dr. Carswell. He examined you at your request and diagnosed hypertension. He said you were in need of rest and suggested that you took a few days' leave. At least a few days. You chose to ignore his advice.
At that particular time, it was quite impossible.
Have you subsequently taken leave?
No, sir.
Why not? Did you think the department would collapse without you? Would it?
Obviously not.
Obviously not.
In fact,
Well?
Well, I did suggest myself that the inspector should take a few days.
That was last week, sir. You know very well for the past few months I haven't even had time to...
That's not strictly true, Inspector. A lot of what you've done could have been placed elsewhere.
Well, I don't think so.
But then, as you've already said, you're not very good at delegating authority. It's something you might well learn, Inspector.
What it all boils down to is that I'm being accused, first of prejudice, then of negligence, then of allowing my mental state to impair my judgment.
What it all boils down to, Inspector, is an informal examination of procedure.
Which is why I was brought into this office in the first place.
It is.
Then I suggest that it might have been more reasonable for you to have laid it on the line.
We all have our methods, Inspector, as this past hour or so has shown.
I take it that I'm to be suspended.
Now, that isn't the answer, and you know it.
I formally request that I be suspended from duties until you've finished your inquiry.
Sit down, Inspector.
I insist.
I said sit down. When a copper steps out of line, he's sat on and sat on hard for one good reason, the reputation of this force. We've got enough trouble without it coming from the inside. Now, if I thought for 1 minute that you were guilty of victimization, of deliberately mishandling this case, I'd run you out of the force. You took chances, Gamble. And before you do it too often, it's as well to remember that an overzealous officer is just as rotten as the one who holds out his hand. I've pushed too hard, but I had to know the answers. I'm satisfied with what I've heard. I shall tell Mr. Davis and your chief constable that they have no cause for concern. In the meantime, I suggest no. No, I order you to take some leave. We'll survive without you. I'm sorry to have kept you. No doubt you'll be wanting to get home. I wish you good night.
Night, sir.
Night.
Oh, that's that. Yes, that's that. He comes in here, tears me to pieces.
That'll do, Gamble. Had to be done, and you know it.
There are ways of...
I'm tired. I'm going home. I advise you to do the same.
No, just like that.
Exactly like that.
Yes. Sir.
Too late. Pictures now. Suppose it's a telly. Unless, of course, you fancy a drink.
What?
I'll buy you a drink.
Oh, consolation.
No,
You'd like to see me crying into my beer, is that it?
it's been a long day. I thought you might like a drink, that's all.
Well, what the hell did you expect?
Not self-pity, that's least of all.
All right, then, Sergeant. You can get me drunk.
John?
It's Helen.
Oh,
I said I'd...
yes. She's telephoned. I forgot to tell you.
Look, Vicky,
Tomorrow. We'll make it tomorrow.
I thought I'd wait for you.
No questions. That's all I ask, Helen. No questions.